Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of Doing It Different. Today, I have my friend Bryn Daylor with me, and one of my favorite things to do is to interview friends because it's just so easy. So, Bryn, thank you for being here. I'm so excited to talk about your work and your life. And how are you today?
I'm so happy to be here. This is my second or third day back in Austin after some long travels, which we were just talking about. And so I feel really grounded and just peaceful being home again. So happy to be here.
I need to absorb some of your groundedness because
Mm.
I have, honestly, the other morning, Austin was like, I'm getting some Tasmanian devil energy. And not that I was like being evil, just that like I couldn't stop moving.
Like a
I was
tornado.
kind of like a human whirlwind. And so
Yes.
I'm really, right now, my focus in my work is on grounding. And it's been really
Mm.
hard since getting home from our summer trips. So I'm soaking that in through the screen with you right now.
Beautiful. You can have as much as you want.
So let's talk a little bit about your work. Tell us what you do and what your
Mm.
mission is right now.
Yeah, so I am a sex, love, and embodiment coach. So I help women specifically with connecting to their desires, both in and out of the bedroom. And by doing that, what I get so lit up by is helping them create lives that turn them on. And when we think of turn on, usually it's associated with sex, right? Arousal. And I love to think of turn on in all senses, just being activated and lit up by life. And I find that when you are able to do that confidently in the bedroom, it bleeds into all other areas of your life. Because when you know your voice and you know what you desire and you can speak into that sexually, it translates everywhere else. And so my path was learning how to do that as an individual and a woman post divorce. And since then, I've been on a mission to help any woman looking to reclaim that part of her do the same.
Yeah, and I have loved watching your transformation and your
Mm.
path since we met. Has it been 2 years?
Gosh, that feels wild, but yeah, it's been 2 years almost.
Yeah, so a lot has changed for you since we first met, and I feel truly, Bryn, like you are a different person,
Mm.
and not in a bad way, in a really incredible way where I feel like I know you on
Mm.
a deeper way, and I can really see who you are. Whereas in the past, it wasn't as evident.
I was in cocoon mode for sure. Transformation.
Totally. And so it's been so beautiful to watch how you've taken a really hard time in your life. And of course, there have been like down in the dump moments, but also you have used it to fuel such incredible growth and definitiveness in your life. Like, you know
Mm.
what you want now and you're going after it. And just love celebrating that part of you. And I'm
Mm.
really excited for my community to get to hear your story around that. So, you
Thank
mentioned
you.
divorce. Will you tell us a little bit about what your relationship was like before divorce was even on the table?
Yeah. So thank you for that reflection. That was really kind and sweet. And the word that kept coming up while you were saying that is devotion. I feel like I've been so devoted to myself these past 2 years, and in that devotion to my own inner knowing of just what I want and what I desire, even when it didn't feel clear, I've been able to create a really beautiful life. And if we rewind back to when I was married. So I met my partner, my previous partner, when I was 20. And we were young and in love, or in lust, I would say at first, right? We had that instant physical connection. And we did the dance that so many people do because it's what we're taught, right? You meet the guy. If you're valued in society, he will want to put a ring on it, and you will get married, and you will have children, and you will follow the American dream. And our relationship followed that model. And it wasn't to say that there was necessarily anything wrong with that. It was just there was no intention behind what we were doing. We were just following the model that had been placed before us. And it was because it was all that we knew. We didn't have models of what we really wanted to aspire to be in relationship from our parents. I am a child of divorce, as are many at this time. And so I didn't have that model growing up, nor did I really have it in my friend circle either. Everybody had followed the same model of you find the person, and when the timing just aligns that you happen to be dating this person at the time that you would happen to be getting married, then you just do the dance together. And it's not to say that Chris and I didn't love each other. There was so much love in that relationship. He was my best friend. And in many ways, we are still just as close on the other side of our divorce, which I'm sure we'll get into. But everything, honestly, Carly, was just flat. The whole thing fell flat in that the track for me was I was a very codependent, I can use that word now because I can see the model that it was from a bird's eye view. Very codependent child. My mother did everything for me. And that was her way of showing me love. Being a single mother and raising me without the support of a father, she wanted to do the best she could. And so she almost overcompensated by doing everything. So if I didn't want to do my homework, she was at the table doing it for me. If I didn't want to go to school, that's fine. You can stay home today. If I didn't want to like be in a certain commitment, it's fine. You can cancel it. You don't need to commit to anything. And at the time, as a young adult, like it was incredible. I got everything that I ever wanted all the time. And then looking back, I can see where I wasn't in integrity. I wasn't working towards things that I actually desired. I didn't suffer or struggle ever. I just had everything handed to me. And then I fall in love immediately after being in the nest from my family into college with this man who essentially repeated that same pattern for me. Do everything for me, give me everything that I want. I didn't have to make any decisions in that relationship. He controlled the finances, he directed our hobbies, our friend group, our travels. I was fully hands off all the time. And it wasn't until I would say year 7 or 8 that this part of me started to come online that craved autonomy and independence. I just started to get this ping. And it started off as like a whisper, right? This internal, who are you? Who are you without this man? Who are you just outside of being a wife, outside of being a business owner? It was so clear that I was living my life for everyone else. And that whisper started to become more of like an audible shout. And then it became a scream that you have to figure out who you are outside of this relationship. And that didn't necessarily mean divorce at the time, but I had this really primal desire to know who I was and my desires because I was just in this cycle of I do this for you, I do this for us. And there was no I in any of that. And once that voice started to come online, it was very clear. It was as if I saw the future that there was going to be a path in which I started to know who I was again. And I was very willing to do that at whatever cost because I finally saw that I was worthy of knowing who that was.
I am literally captivated by your story just because I see parts of everyone in it. And I think what is most personal is most universal. And
Mm-hmm.
there, even if people are in happy relationships, there's always just tiny speckles in people's stories that we say, oh my gosh, I see myself there. Oh my gosh, I've had those exact same feelings. And I think one interesting thing that you brought up that Austin and I have also been together about 10 years. So whenever I hear your story, I have these thoughts like, oh wow, like we almost like we're on the same timeline. And
Mm-hmm.
where I think you and Chris kind of had your separating parts, Austin and I figured out somehow how to have like personal development together. And that I feel like didn't save our relationship because it never needed saving, but it made it so it would last and can last. Like we found different tools to be able to find ourselves, to explore different things. And I'm super grateful for that, but I'm also grateful for these other stories that I get to learn from.
Absolutely.
And one thing you mentioned was that your relationship wasn't very intentional. And I don't think that my relationship was very intentional until the last couple of years. And I think that's the point I'm trying to make. And so people out there who may not understand what an intentional relationship is or what that feels like. Or I know because I get in my DMs that there are people craving more intention in their relationship, but they genuinely don't know how to infuse that into their life and their partnership. What is a good way for people to first examine and know, like, okay, is my relationship intentional? Or like to take the first step to bringing more intention into it?
Yeah, that's a beautiful question because I know my next evolution in myself will be bringing that intention into partnership and being able to grow together, like you said, as a unit. Whereas Chris and I found personal development, and because our collective garden really needed to die. I mean, there was no way that we could have continued at that time with the weeds that we had in our relationship. So we had to essentially burn it to the ground, and we could have come back together. And that was a reality that I had to face, was that we could have chosen to stay united and to move forward, and we didn't. And that was our path. And so I love hearing that you and Austin hit the same spot and chose to rise together. And in terms of intentionality, so I think one of my favorite tools ever is really tapping into intuition, getting out of the logical mind and into the body. And if you were even to sit here and to close your eyes and to drop into your belly and even further down, I'm going to get woo woo with you for a minute, but into this womb space, right, where we hold so much wisdom, and to sit and to just ask yourself, like on a scale of 1 to 10, how intentional is my relationship? And just trust whatever number comes to you. Again, not from a place of logical thinking, but what's the first number you think of, right? So you are the person that knows your relationship the best. There's no coach, no guide that is going to give that answer to you. So get honest with yourself. What level of intention are you bringing? And so let's say that you answered like a 3, right? So what would take that 3 from a 4 or a 5? We don't need to go from 3 to 10. But intention is all about taking time to have vision and direction. So we're not just waking up and going through our day with total flow. There's a bit of structure, there's a bit of guidance and vision. And one of my favorite tools, it's so simple, but it's so effective, is having a state of the union or relationship. What Alexa calls it, my partner in business, is a relationship board meeting. And so once a week, taking you and your partner, and we have a free resource for this that I'd love to share and people can use so that there's structure to it. It's a check-in. It's a relationship check-in. So rather than, again, just going through the daily motions, and at the end of the day, you're sitting in bed going, like, what did I do today? And not just in work, but in my relationship, arguably one of the most important pillars of your life. Then you get to start focusing on, okay, let's add a little bit more direction. And in this conversation that you have once a week, you cover the different important arcs and parts of a relationship. So you touch on things like sex. How's our sex life? Again, you can drop into that intuitive space and give it a number. And let's say it's at an 8. Well, what would make it a 9? Let's bring intention now into taking this from, good to great. And you're talking about travel. Okay, we haven't been on a trip in a long time. So rather than waiting until we're both ready to just drop a bomb on our lives because we're so bored, how can we bring intention into planning the things that are important to us? And a lot of this also comes from values. So making sure you and your partner have an idea of what you both value, because from that place, you prioritize and you can bring intention into your values.
So good. And I agree with everything. Austin and I do a relationship meeting every Sunday to start the week
Amazing.
off like that and just know what is on each other's calendar. What's this week going to be like? That's first and foremost. And then it's planning things like, what do we want sex to look like? Who are we going to see this week? Do we have travel coming up? What do we want to bring to our week that felt like maybe was missing last week? So I do think that is the perfect place to start, and we'll link that free relationship board meeting download in the show notes.
Mm.
I would love to get back to your story because we left off, I think, where you were feeling like, oh my gosh, I need autonomy and I need to experience life on my own. And at that point, you said you weren't thinking divorce, but you might have been making some changes. So, what was going on then?
So the whisper became the shout eventually. And at the time, my partner and I, we were in an RV and we were traveling the country. And so if you really want to test your relationship and you want to see where the breakdowns are, move into a really small space because it becomes essentially just a container for massive growth and transformation because there's nowhere to
Literally.
hide. Yeah, literally. So we were seeing all of the breakdowns in our communication where we were collapsing in our relationship. So unable to stay open and navigate through conflict. We were seeing where we had really different desires all of a sudden and the compromise just wasn't there. So there were so many individual moments of breakdown. And at the time, neither one of us had the tools to really to be the hero in the relationship. To say, you know what, I'm triggered too, but I can come back to myself and regulate and hold you in your shit while you process this. And not from a place of being walked over, but from a place of because I know how to hold myself, I can therefore hold you. Neither one of us knew that. On the other side, we've both done a much better job of figuring this out. And so it was just really intense. Intense was the best way to describe it because you had two humans that were deeply hurt, deeply craving connection, but neither one of us knew how to do it. And all we knew how to do was just be in our own emotional storm. And so I needed to get out of the RV. I needed physical space. I know this about myself now that it's in my moments of stillness and quiet and retreat, almost like I'll use the phrase, I need to go into my cave. And human design even affirmed that for me, that I'm a cave woman. I need my private space.
The hermit lady.
Yes. And it's funny, it's no wonder that being in 120 square feet with my partner for 6 months didn't work great for me. So I said to him, it was actually the day of my 30th birthday. And I was so raw and so tender and just felt this energy of stepping into a new decade. And it was so clear that I just had to trust the inner knowing. The inner knowing said, you need to be on your own. And so I trusted that voice and I said, I'm going to go to Austin and I don't know what's going to happen from there, but I need to go and we'll figure the rest out. And he drove me in the RV to Austin. I kept the RV and he moved to California at the time. And that was day one of solo life with Bryn. And it was the most exhilarating and freeing and affirming moment I'd ever had, where the moment he left, I had a huge sigh of relief. And it was in that moment I knew you made the right decision.
Wow.
Yeah, it was very powerful.
So you're in this place, you're in Austin, and you guys are starting to like separate and go through what is essentially like will end up in divorce. What were you going through at that time? Because I can imagine that while you did feel that sense of relief and that true like physical sigh, and your shoulders might have, dropped, and your body felt like, okay, this is fucking scary, but I'm also doing what I know I have to do. There were still incredible amounts of pain and hardship and agony. So, what was that like?
So, the best way to describe it was at first I had literally new relationship energy with myself. It was like the best thing in the world. I was taking myself on solo dates for the first time in my entire life, Carly. I was only answering to myself. I'd never had that before, ever. I was just waking up for me and building my day and my life around only my desires. And it was intoxicating. I mean, it was truly like a drug. I was the most alive and the most free, and also the most terrified I'd ever been. Because you take someone who has never had to make a decision for herself in her entire life, and all of a sudden, that is nothing but my entire day, making decisions. And I truly hit decision fatigue constantly. Like, I remember just being exhausted because I never had to plan and have that much intention for myself before. I was always deferring and defaulting. And so I watched myself essentially transfer my codependence at times onto friends or work. And so I just had way more alone time to be with myself and my thoughts. And so I really just got intimate with myself. And I would say it was maybe 3 to 4 months where that new relationship energy started to wear off. And the oh shit, you're alone started to sink in. And it was in those moments, it was almost like the grief that had just been sitting underneath the surface waiting to be touched came just rearing its ugly head. And I remember feeling literally writhing in pain and in sadness in my bed because I had never, up until that moment in my life, experienced such depth of emotion. I came into this world as a very feeling and very sensitive creature. And it was in my desire to be loved that I started to dull that. The world and society and friendships and my previous partner showed me in different ways that it was too much. And it was too much to be received. They didn't know how to hold it. And so I started to dull that part of me. I started to dull the part of me that can feel and can feel so deeply. And now I see it as such a gift. But at the time, it was this resurgence of that coming back online. And so even though I was just heartbroken, even though it was my decision, even though I was in the most pain physically and emotionally I'd ever been in, it was the most alive I had ever felt. I felt everything. It has me getting teary just thinking about it because it was this re-entry point back to me coming home to myself, being able to experience the full depth of emotion, from the most ecstatic bliss of me going to like an ecstatic dance event by myself and just feeling my body and joy and pleasure for the first time and confidence come online, to that same night being in bed and being just heartbroken that my partner allowed me to walk away and didn't fight for me. And so, yeah, it was a fucking roller coaster. And I was hitting those high highs and those low lows every day for probably the better half of a year. And it was really challenging to, you actually articulated it so well, to come to a new community in which nobody knew me. And I was still very much figuring out who I was. And I'm just showing them all parts of myself. And it was really in this past year and a half where I really got comfortable with vulnerability and trusting that by letting you see into me, the right people will be attracted and will come find me. And I find that true now in romantic partnership too. The more authentically I show up as myself, the more I attract my people. And it has been so rewarding.
Yeah. And I definitely want to get into the gifts of divorce because I definitely think there are gifts. But one question I have for you, and I think this is something that I struggle with, and I think a lot of people struggle with. How did you stay in that place of feeling? Like, it's so easy to escape it or to feel it for like 2 days and be like, I'm over this. I'm going to numb out. I'm going to pretend it doesn't exist. I'm going to push it away. How did you stay in that really hard place for that long and just almost like you felt it out of you?
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's hard. The hardest thing to do is to stay in that place. So, like, do you have any insight into like how you made that happen?
That's a great question. So the truth is I didn't stay in it all the time, right? There were definitely times in which I chose to numb or to avoid. And it was in those moments that my body would come back and hit me 10 times harder. So the more in tune I got with the subtleties of the body, I got really sick at times, and it was a real test to how connected we are emotionally and physically and mentally. And so I started to see that when I allowed the emotion to just move through me, it's never as intense or as long as we make it up to be. It's like when we build a conversation up in our head that we're afraid of, that could result in some conflict, and we lose sleep over it, and we like sweat about it, and we just build and build and build and build. And then we have the conversation and it's crunchy and it sucks. But on the other side, you're like, oh, that actually wasn't that bad. I find the same to be true with feeling. That if I just let myself touch it fully, I read this somewhere. I want to say it's Dr. Joe Dispenza that talks about this, that an emotion truly, without story and without us elaborating and essentially adding fuel to the fire, can shift in 90 seconds to 2 minutes. And so if you find that you are indulging in an emotion longer than that, chances are you're fueling it. And so it's almost like if you can, like a workout where they're, you're in this HIIT class and it's the burnout and they're like, you can do anything for 90 seconds. It's almost the same with feeling. Like if you
Yeah.
just let yourself touch this all the way, let it fully consume your being for 2 minutes, I imagine there is relief and a sense of bliss on the other side. Which is interesting to think about because we don't usually associate bliss with like deep rage or bliss with deep sadness. But if you've ever had a good cry and you allow yourself to just fully go into it, and on the other side, you're like, I feel tingly and warm and just peace again. And
Yeah.
so, yeah, I think it's permission to go there and see that it's never as long or as challenging as we think that it's going to be.
Yeah, and when you're saying this, what comes up for me is like touching those hot emotions, those hard emotions, letting them really sink into your body and fully feel them is the human experience.
Yes.
It's one of few things that separate us from other animals and how they experience the earth, so, or the universe, whatever it is, their experience here. And so it really is like something that makes us human, which is really beautiful when you think about
So
it like that.
much. Yes. And my job and every human's job is to expand your capacity to feel more. So because the more we can hold, it's not just the sadness and grief, but the more pleasure we can experience. It's one and the same. You can't ignore these challenging emotions without numbing yourself to the other ones. That's essentially what I did for years, is I just said, oh, I can't feel this, which means I'm not going to feel anything. And so when you expand your capacity to feel, you're going to feel more pleasure and more bliss as a result. And you'll also have the capacity to essentially be with anything that life throws your way. You become unfuckwithable. And it's a superpower.
Yeah, absolutely. I always think of humans as a mountain, and weather, like extreme weather, beautiful weather, intense weather is always coming through. And
Mm,
we have to weather it no matter what. We're just this mountain and we don't get to control what comes in our field and what passes us. And the more we can increase and enhance our ability to take on any storm, any summer, all the highs and lows, the better we experience life and the more
mm,
beautiful life is on a daily, weekly, yearly basis.
so true.
One thing I want to talk about before we get to where you and Chris are as a couple, not as a couple today, but as friends today,
Mhm.
I want to talk about the gifts of divorce because I feel like you started hinting at them when you started talking about a new community and vulnerability. So I think society has this idea that divorce is really fucking hard and really
Mhm.
sad and it kind of ends there.
Mhm.
And I have seen from a few people in my life, you being one of them, that there are true gifts in separation, in partnerships ending, and in divorce. And so, watching you go through this in the incredible way that you have, I would love to hear a little bit about the upside and how this has changed your life and the beauty that divorce has given you.
Mm, I love this question. There's so many things that have come since the divorce. The first one that comes to mind is because, like I said, Chris and I could have stayed together. I remember the judge asking me the day of our divorce, was your marriage irretrievably broken? And I knew that I had to say yes in order to appease him so that we could be granted our divorce. But the answer was no, it wasn't irretrievably broken. And in fact, by us still moving forward with that decision, we got to keep all of the best parts of one another without this pressure cooker of who we thought we needed to be to please one another. And so I got to keep all of the best parts of our friendship and our connection and our love without having us to be romantic partners. And so, had we stayed together, who knows where it would have ended and what it would have looked like? No one would know that. But now I can confidently say, Chris and I will be in each other's lives until the end of time. I love him. That is why we were together for 10 years. We had the best time in exploration and travel and building businesses together. That doesn't change when you get divorced. Like, he's still that person.
Yeah, I mean, I love that you guys are on podcast together talking about this. And I've like seen you at Barton Springs together and just like you guys are truly friends.
Mhm.
Will you share the what the judge said to you at your divorce when you guys were on the same screen in the same room going through your divorce, the final step of your divorce together? Because I thought that was so
Mhm.
beautiful and so telling of
Mm.
how both of you stepped up to handle this with such maturity and love.
Thank you. Yeah. So, because of COVID, they've been doing these divorce hearings. I said ceremony because that's what it felt like, but the divorce hearings virtually. And so we we were on a Zoom screen together, and because we now live 5 minutes down the road, ironically, from one another. And it was always my intention that morning to share that experience together. It was a big moment in our lives, the official ending of our marriage. And we had decided we were going to get breakfast after and just we cried and we shared memories and we had breakfast tacos. And when we were standing side by side, the judge said to me, "It's really beautiful to see that you two have come together in this way." He said, "I don't think I've ever had a couple on the same screen for this divorce. And it's really a testament of the work that you two have done to be able to stay friends like this in this moment."
So
And
beautiful.
it was, I hear this reflected to me all of the time. Like, it's so amazing what you two have done. And I forget that this isn't the norm because it was always so clear to me that this is how I want to choose to separate from you. And the only reason I was able to do this, and I feel this so confidently now, is we had to take time apart to fully grieve the relationship. We had to have a full separation. There were months and months and months where Chris and I didn't speak. And I let myself fully feel the sadness and the grief and the heartbreak of ending our relationship. Because had I tried to come back and to rebuild our friendship on resentment, hidden emotion, anger, jealousy, because we're now both dating, it wouldn't have worked. But we both went away, we took care of our own shit, and then we came back together and said, "I now choose you as a friend." And that felt really good to do it honestly, because there's no part of me that feels charged now. We'll get on the phone with one another and talk about each other's sex lives, being who we're seeing and dating and how things are going. And there's not a bone in my body that feels uncomfortable. And it's because I did the work necessary to be able to have that relationship with him.
And it's truly incredible. And I don't know if that is possible for every couple ending, but the fact
No.
that you two have been able to figure that out and land in a place you both feel good and use each other as such sources of comfort and friendship moving forward, it really does show just how much you cared about each other.
Hmm.
And it's really, really cool to see.
Thank you. And I love that you named not every couple is capable of that. Because sometimes I think people see our story and they get really sad or frustrated that they aren't able to have that with their partner. And I usually just reply to them, "What's a piece of my story that you could implement in your own?" Right? So it's not necessarily going to look exactly the same way. We're different. Chris and I both had to choose this coming together for us to be friends moving forward. And so if your partner is unable or in your separation, if they're unable to meet you in that, what's something that would allow you to be in integrity that you feel really good and committed to? transitioning in love, right? Because you can't control what the other person does, but what would it look like for you to approach the separation from a place of love, from a place of commitment to your feeling, your heart. And yeah, it takes time. It takes, like I said, it takes that separation, being able to really feel the sadness and grief, and then coming back and saying, okay, what does it look like for me to move forward from a place of love and vulnerability?
Yeah. I feel like I cut you off talking about some of the gifts that you
Oh,
have noticed or realized or received from this time in your life and from this experience. Do you want to get back to that, or do you have any more you want to share?
yeah. So I shared one about the fact that Chris and I now have each other in our lives. And I would say the next, most important one was that I found myself, right? And I want to, I guess, dive in and talk about what finding yourself means, because I think it's a phrase that gets thrown around a lot. And it's like, well, what the fuck does it actually mean? And here's the thing, you can do this in partnership. So I never want to paint the picture that because I got divorced, this was the only route in which this was possible. For me, it was. For me, this was my path to doing this. And I trust that. So on the other side of the divorce was a life in which I got to fully build one based off of everything that I desire, everything that feels good to me. And in that, I kept discovering deeper and deeper levels of who is Bryn? Like, who is she when you strip away all of the labels that I was so attached to? Wife, business owner, Chris and I were somewhat of a power couple in our previous community. And so letting my ego just fully let that go, when all of these people were so upset that we separated, thinking that we had this picture perfect relationship. And I just kept discovering more and more of like what makes me happy and what turns me on, and then giving myself permission to build my life around that. So I moved to a city in which I was fully turned on by. I started going to events that I like felt this pull towards. So I named ecstatic dance was one. I got into plant medicine ceremonies. I started to go to women's circles where I was just like building these beautiful connections, and I didn't have anyone to fall back on. And so it was so pivotal for me to put myself out there at a level in which I had never done before. And so the growth was tremendous because I basically had a blank canvas, and every decision I made was so intentional. It was like you didn't just drop a bomb on your life, leave your marriage, leave your previous city, sell your home, and do all of this shit to rebuild a life that looks exactly the same. So every single decision I made was, what do you want? Like, what do you actually want? Now that you gave yourself permission to have it, you get to go for it. And so now I still look around my apartment and I pinch myself because it's like I created this, and there's nothing more rewarding, and like my feelings of self-worth and confidence have just gone through the roof because everything in my life that I've said I wanted, I've given to myself, and that has felt so fulfilling. So fulfilling. And then I would say the last gift in divorce, which is, it's going to be actually ironic, is I see marriage in a whole new light. I see partnership in a whole new light. And I'm getting a little choked up just thinking about it because I see the reverence and I see the beauty in partnership. And I didn't see that when I was in my marriage. I took it for granted. I just assumed everyone had this. We did the dance, we fell in love, we got married. And now from this place of longing and admiration, I look at people that have beautiful relationships and I go, oh, okay, I can now actually see what I want to build and what I want to create with intention. And I'm not going to just fall into the next thing that falls in front of me. I'm going to choose the most extraordinary version of a person I've ever met. And together we will build the life that is perfect for us. And that fucking excites me so deeply. To be able to take that level of intention in my next relationship, it's so thrilling. And yeah, now I get to support other people in creating that. And I just have so much love in my heart for the woman I am today and who I had to become in order to have all of this. And divorce was my gateway to that. And I wouldn't change that for a minute.
Yeah, I'm over here listening to you, and my whole body is like, fuck yes. It's so beautiful in the way you're talking about how you view relationships and the relationship you want in the future. And I know that that is out there waiting for you. And when the time is right, that
Mm.
will 100% be part of your future. And you also said something that just like blew my mind. And I want to frame because I think it's applicable for divorce, but so many other things. You said, I didn't just blow up my entire life to build the exact same life again. And I love that. Like, let's
Mm.
take the change and actually use it to create what we want with that intention that we talked about earlier on the show. And you're such an incredible example of that. And I'm just like, this conversation is for all women, whether you've been divorced or not, or you just want to live a life that feels more in alignment with who you truly are.
Mm.
These are the tools, these are the things we all need to keep in mind.
Mm. Thank
Yeah.
you. Yeah.
There's one thing I want to touch on before we go into sex and what your work looks like today, and just kind of talking about some of your newer experiences as someone who isn't in a relationship. You did have a partner after your divorce, you had a
Mm.
relationship, and
Mm.
it ended. And
Mm.
there was a question that you asked yourself, and you can talk about this relationship if you want to, or we can just keep it at this, the ending part and the question that you asked yourself. But there was a really profound question that I'll never forget after you shared it to me
Mm.
that you heard from another coach. And the answer to it led you to know that this person wasn't for you and that you were going to
Mm.
leave the relationship. Will you talk a little bit about that?
Ooh, yeah. Yes, yes. What a powerful question. This moment will forever be imprinted in my mind because it's one of those moments of divinity where you're like, I'm exactly in the right place at the right time. And thank you. Thank you, universe, for giving me this beautiful gift. I did fall in love really quickly after my marriage ended. And looking back, my therapist at the time told me, she goes, this is your branch. She named it before I was ready to really see it and ready to hear her because I remember being so triggered by that comment. And he absolutely was. And I would do it all over again because of the strength and the beauty that I found in him loving me in a way that I hadn't allowed myself to be loved in my marriage. And so, yes, I technically fell from one relationship to the other, but it was exactly what I needed at the time. And my indecision about whether or not this was my person for essentially the better half of a year, I can now see as a clear no, right? Like my lack of fuck yes was really my no, but I just wasn't able to be with it yet. And I was going through so much change and so much transformation and so much heartbreak, but I just wasn't ready to let go of my branch yet. And it was towards the end of the relationship. I obviously didn't know this at the time, but it was towards the end, and I had an opportunity to essentially, we were doing long distance, and I had the opportunity to move to go be with this person. And I was going back and forth, back and forth. All of my girlfriends were mirroring to me like, this isn't it, but you keep staying and we're just going to support you in whatever you decide. And this person, I was in a clubhouse room with a very gifted coach. Actually, you've had her on the podcast, Annie
Mhm.
Lala, who is also your personal relationship coach, I
Yeah,
believe.
Austin and I have done work with Annie as well.
Yes. So Annie, she charges a hefty penny for relationship coaching, and I'm
Oh,
in
yeah.
this clubhouse room and she's giving it away for free. And I'm like, hello, I've got a question, ma'am. So she was asking just people to come with their relationship advice and or questions. And I said to her, at the time I actually was recovering from COVID. I got really sick, which is a whole other episode in and of itself. But the sickness was having me question everything, question the relationship. I was so just down and out. And I said to her, in the peak of my sickness, I thought I really wanted to be with this person. It was so clear, like, this is my person, and I just want him to take care of me. And I said to her, and as I've gotten healthier and stronger and I can see the light at the end of the tunnel, I'm starting to doubt again. And so she asks me, she said, how long have you been in this partnership? And I said, it's been about a year and a half. She said, if nothing were to change with this person, if he were to stay exactly as he was in this moment, because after a year and a half of knowing somebody, you're probably not going to receive any new information. If they were exactly who they are, would that be enough? And would you still be so excited to say and choose this person forever? So that was the first blow. I was like, oof, no. The answer was just a no. And she took it a layer deeper and she said to me, do you want children? And I instantly start to cry because motherhood for sure is a path that I want to go down. And she said, well, I want you to connect with the spirit of your future child and ask them, is this their father? And Carly, I instantly broke down because it was just a full embodied no. I mean, I don't even think I got the thought fully out before it was just no, just raining through my entire body. And I'll never forget that. I'll never forget what it felt like to connect with the daughter I haven't yet had. And also my intuition of, all along, like these voices and these knowings are inside of you. We just have to give ourselves permission to cut all the external shit out and to listen. Like it's a constant journey of returning home and trusting yourself. And yeah, that was my no. And shortly after, the relationship ended.
Yeah, and that story, like I said, I'll never forget that. It's so beautiful, and I just appreciate you sharing it so much, because I think the example of silence, the example of what asking good questions, I truly believe the quality of our life depends on the quality of questions we ask ourselves. And this is a perfect example of those two things. And just that they're going to lead you. Your
Mhm.
intuition, your gut, whatever your answer, your body gives you in that stillness, it's not wrong.
No.
Even if you want it to be wrong,
Yes.
even if you're so afraid of what is going to come from
Oh.
that answer, it's not wrong.
Yep. That's to me the hardest. It's not challenging for me to follow the yes. It's when my intuition is saying, no, walk away. This isn't for you. That's when it's like, oof. Are you sure? Should I pull another tarot card to affirm this?
Yes. And you know
Uh,
what's interesting is I have seen so many times in my own life and other people's life when they keep getting that no and kind of that answer is fluttering around, they know it's there, they're kind of ignoring it. That's when the universe pulls that rug out from underneath your feet and says, you had that choice for so long. You don't have it anymore. I'm going to make
mhm.
this choice for you. And it's way harder. And I've seen it over and over again, and I'll look at us and I'll be like, ooh, the universe finally pulled that rug out from under that
Yep.
person because we knew this was coming.
Mhm.
Um, and I'm so glad that you have made the choices when you have, and that we all have, because we've either learned from them, whether they were really hard or not, or we've learned to listen to our intuition. And like you
Yeah.
said, it's a constant of coming back. We've never perfected this. There's no one in the
No.
world who has perfected this, and we'll fuck it up 18,000 more times. But it is, I don't even know where I'm going with it. But
I love it.
yeah, before our time runs out,
Mhm.
I want to talk a little bit about sex because that is your profession in terms of how you work with couples and people. And your sex life has changed a lot since you became
Mhm.
single. So let's first talk about how your sex life is different from maybe it was a year ago and how exciting that is.
Yeah. Oh, my favorite. So I named in leaving my marriage, it was a blank canvas. It was, what do I want? What do I desire? And that desire was also sexually. So in our marriage, is what we always knew it to be. It was missionary. It was, we're going to do a little bit of foreplay. We're going to, maybe you'll go down on me. Maybe you'll finger me for a minute and then we'll have penetrative sex. You'll come, maybe I'll come, and then sex is over. And it was the same routine over and over. And I was on hormonal birth control for the better half of my marriage. I had almost no sex drive towards, I would say, the second half. And I just thought that was normal. You know, it's what everyone told me would happen. Like over time, you'll lose attraction to your partner. You may not enjoy sex as much, but you do it anyway. And it's normal if you just have less and less sex. And like my inner knowing again knew that was bullshit. And in leaving my marriage, it was again, okay, you didn't figure this out together, but what do you want now? And I hired a sex coach, which is did at the time didn't even know that was a thing. I didn't know sexual development was a thing. I had no clue. I just always thought sex was the same and everybody was doing it the same way. And maybe porn had showed me a little bit of an other, world out there, but I just didn't know. And I remember stumbling across that sex chick who I now work for. So it has officially come full circle. And saying to her, listen, I don't know what I don't know. Show me. Like, show me. You can hire a coach to help you be stronger in the gym. You can hire somebody to help you become a better cook. You can hire somebody for all of these other things. Sex was this gaping hole of, I don't know how to improve this for myself. And so I want your help. I want to enlist you in me having a more fulfilling sex life. And it started with reconnecting to my body. It started with reconnecting to my pleasure, getting to know myself intimately, like doing mirror work for the first time, where I'm staring at my vulva in a mirror and going through the waves of disgust and repulsion. And I don't want to look at you to, oh my gosh, I'm so sorry I've neglected you for so long. And I commit to being more loving and paying attention to you and to see you as this beautiful part of me that literally brings life into this world. I'm so sorry that I was so disconnected from you for so long. And seeing this as a power center on my body and just treating it with more respect. And so I started to build a self-pleasure practice. I bought all of these sex toys. I bought crystal wands for me to play with and to experience just sex as something different. First of all, sex with myself. So what did I like? Like what turns me on? And starting to dive into this essentially open menu of all of the flavors that were now fully available to me. And kink and BDSM were one of them. And so in hiring a sex coach, I got to say, okay, I've had vanilla sex for a really long time, and there's nothing fucking wrong with that. There were times where the sex was great, but again, I want to live in a world where anything is possible, and I want to try some of these other flavors. So I started to go to trainings and workshops where I learned about hair pulling and choking and spanking and dominance and submission and fantasy. And it just, every time I went to one of these workshops, my mind expanded a little bit more. I got to see, oh, this is what's available. Because when you don't know, you don't know. It's really hard to build from nothing. But I started to look and model and see like, oh, I now understand what it looks like to be tied up. And I enjoyed part of that. Cool. Now I get to take this and bring this with me. Or like, okay, I didn't like that flavor, so I'm going to leave that one behind, but I'm still really grateful that I tried it. And then the next evolution was, okay, I'm starting to get really clear on what I like. And part of that is a little bit of this BDSM world. Part of it is also playing with energy. And so a really, really helpful tool that's free that anyone can use is called the Erotic Blueprint. And it's learning about your turn on as if it were a love language. So I can now see my partner and I at the time were speaking different languages sexually, and we had no tools or communication to understand that. I, like many women, needed more anticipation, more psychological play, and more buildup for me to be really open to sex. My partner, purely sexual. He was like 0 to 100 in just looking at my ass. He needed no time whatsoever. And so he would go to grab me and I would literally like move my body away from him, which probably felt heartbreaking and awful to him in the moment. I didn't understand why I was having that reaction to him. And now I look at it and I'm like, oh, well, I'm an energetic blueprint. I need time to play in the tension. I need slowness. I need eye gazing and presence. And I need to feel your energy build while mine is building too. So it's no fucking wonder why we just were so incompatible at that time. But now I have language around it. And so now when I'm dating and somebody asks me what I like, I can say, I want you to tease the fuck out of me. I want you to sit on that bed and have me take my clothes off and for you to just trace your hands over my body, like I'm turned on just thinking about it, and not touch me until I am begging for it. But I didn't have that language at the time. And so now it has been this dance of, okay, I know what I like sexually, and now I get to play. Now I'm in a playground of different possibilities and flavors and partners. And the best part of it has been the confidence because I took the time, I was devoted to my sexual development. And now I get to walk into these situations with ease. I can go to play parties, right? Where I am able to just walk in and say, this is what I'm looking for. Is there anybody available that would like to give this thing to me? And I feel no shame or hesitation in being able to ask for it. And it took reps. It took me doing the work, being educated, and then being willing to be messy and try things. And because sex inherently is messy. And the level at which you are able to be vulnerable in sex is the level at which you're able to be vulnerable in the rest of your life. And so the more I started to get vulnerable everywhere else, it did start to bleed into me having more pleasure, which is ultimately what we want in our sex lives. We want to feel more pleasure, more connection. And yeah, and it's so fun that this is it is a non-negotiable. This is something I lead with. This is something I talk about from almost the very beginning, date one, if not earlier, before we even meet in person. Because if somebody else, I won't say necessarily, they may not need to know everything that I know. I don't expect that. But I do need them to be open to the growth sexually as much as they are growth minded everywhere else in their life.
That makes a lot of sense. And I remember when Austin and I were taking the course with you and Alexa. What was that course called?
Sex and Love Academy.
Sex and Love Academy, which I recommend to everyone. There was one call that you were leading, and it was kind of a rough call for me. And I don't know if other people have said this, if I heard it somewhere, but at the end, I like blurted out, I'm like, I can see why sex is personal development. Like sex is personal development. And it was really the first time that clicked for me. And so it's interesting to be able to watch how you have used sex as a tool to know yourself, pursue confidence, pursue different experiences, just like someone would another modality leading them to the same thing. And it's very recent that that has been on my radar as like valid and that sex could be something that really even brings that out of someone. I never made that connection before. So I love that you are bringing this to the conversation and your work. My question, so you got clear with what you want. You know, if you're going to be dating someone now, you can ask for and share with this person, hey, this is what I'm into. This is what I'd like to experience today. This is what I might like to experience in the future. What are some ways for women in particular to understand their desires? Because it is actually rare for women to know and own their desires.
So true. So a couple of things. I would say first and foremost, this is potentially, I won't necessarily say the easiest, but one of the easier entry points is to start talking about sex with your girlfriends. Start having conversations and ask them about their sex lives and what they're enjoying and what they like. So the more comfortable you can be about talking, you can be talking about sex just as if it was any other conversation, that's going to translate in your relationship. So maybe the thought of having a conversation with your partner makes your butthole pucker. But can you have that conversation with your best friend first, right? Open that point up of, hey, I'm actually feeling really confused about this. Is this something you're open to talking with me more about? Because I'd love to hear what your sex life is like and what are some of the things that turn you on. Think of it as if you were an investigator and your job is just to be curious about what other people are enjoying. It's similar to when we get pinged on social media because we see something we're jealous of. It's a look inward of, oh, there's something about that I actually really desire. You can start having those types of conversations about fantasy and desire with your friends and see, is there anything in which they've shared, if they're willing to share with you, that excites you, that turns you on, that you go, oh, maybe I could like that. Because I've certainly been there where somebody says, what's your fantasy? And I'm like, I have no idea, but I needed context. So your job is to collect more context so that you can start to identify what you like. So that would be one. Another one that's actually really easy is there's an app called Dipsy, and it is an erotic audio app. And in listening to these stories, again, you're collecting context. So notice, like, what are the stories that I'm more excited and turned on by? Is it the story where they have a threesome? Is it the story where she's having sex in a public place? Is it where she's having sex with another woman? These are all clues into your own fantasies. And Dipsy's, there's a free trial, or it's like a small like $9.99, something like that. And it is such a good app. I love it so much. And then from there, this is another resource that our company has put out. It's called the Want, Will, Won't list. And I saved that one for last because it is a big, meaty resource and it's got a lot on it. And at times it can almost be overwhelming, especially if you're really new. So I would say maybe save that one after you've already attempted step 1 and 2 and you've done a little bit of your own research. And then once you're like, okay, I've collected more, then you can visit this list. And it is an extensive checklist of anything you could imagine sexually. And you go through as the giver and the receiver. So, what are the things that I would really want to receive? And what are some of the things that I would really want to give? And again, this is just giving you a look inward of maybe this is a thing that I'd like to try. I don't know, but can you give yourself permission now to take one of those things and to try them, whether you're single or partnered? It starts with being curious.
So good. And Will Want Won't list is really fun.
It
Whether you're
is.
single or in partnership, Austin and I have done it together and like we made a date out of it.
So
So fill
fun.
it out alone, get dressed up, go to dinner, and either bring it to dinner or after when you get home, kind of go through it together. I will say it can be a little triggering, just like, oh, you want that. We've never talked about that. Oh, you don't want that. And we've done that. Just things that are really interesting and sometimes funny. And so, yeah, I really like all of those resources. And I think this is a really important conversation. And I hear from women all the time whenever I put sex and relationship episodes out. People are always saying, thank you for having these conversations. No one is talking about this enough. So, if you are someone in that boat, go look at Bryn's work. Go look at the other podcasts she's been on because this is what she focuses on. This is her story, but also what she's devoted her time and resources to in service of other women and couples. So please make sure you check that all out. Bryn, I feel like I could do literally 3 more hours with you. We could get
Uh,
into embodiment. We could get into all the things, but we're running a little over an hour. And
mm,
I just want to say thank you. Thank you for sharing your story. Thank you for opening your heart to the world and allowing other women to feel heard and seen in your story. And it's really amazing. And I'm just really grateful that you have been here with me today. So thank
mm.
you.
Thank you so much and for having this platform for me to share and for being my friend through such a wild time. I'm so grateful for you.
Yeah. I'm grateful for you as well. And
Mm.
if anyone wants Bryn's contact, all of her links to everything will be in the show notes. So thank you all for listening. And until next time.